Hey, good evening, everyone. We are together for another campfire conversation, and John is already laughing at me. So this is already going off to a bad start. Uh, but tonight, Sam is going to talk to us about what is deep biblical true friendship. And he did this talk at the base camp gathering, and it really halted everybody. There was just this sigh in the room of that's what friendship is. I was hoping it was that. I want to develop this. This is what I need in my life. This is the kind of friend I want to be. So Sam is going to take us through some of this material again and some other stories and so on. So Sam, thank you for doing this, and we're looking forward to it. And go for it, my friend.
Well, thanks, Gary and John. I think for my whole life I've wanted to know more about friendship. I've talked with men and women, and when I talk with them, I think there's always a variety of different obstacles that they're facing. So, some people are having some marital troubles, or some people are having career troubles, or some people are having financial problems. But I think almost universally one of the problems that I hear from people is they lack friends. They lack the kind of friendship that they want in their life. And so I've been thinking about this for years. It's sort of my first draft, but I think it's something really important. I
Hey,
was
Sam,
struck by, yeah, go ahead.
let me jump in with a story of what you just said, and that is years ago I did this a calling retreat in North Carolina with a ministry called The Barn. And Michael Thompson, who we had on a little while back, brought a number of men over. He's in North Carolina. And at the end, I asked him if he wanted to make a comment to everyone there. So this is the last session, end of the weekend. And he said, you know what really hits me is our deep need for friendship. And I mean, everyone in the room gasped at that second. You could just feel everybody saying, oh, that's exactly what I need. So I spent an entire weekend talking about calling and the desires of your heart and how to interpret it and how to develop in it. And he mentioned friendship, and every heart resonated with him. So I just want to, just reinforce what you just said about friendship.
I think that we're all looking for friends. I think that we're made for friendship. And over the years, I've been collecting quotes from C.S. Lewis and Four Loves. He has a chapter on friendship, from Proverbs, from Ralph Waldo Emerson, from Tim Keller, a pastor that I really like, and just taking some notes on my own successes and failures or mistakes. Let me start with one of my mistakes. When I was 8 or 9 years old, I had a very, very good friend named Mark. I mean, he and I were buddies. We did everything together. And one of the things we liked to do together was we would just wrestle, just like guys do. And we were wrestling once, and he got me into a scissors lock, and I couldn't get out of it. And I am ashamed to admit it, but I bit him. And, he let go really quickly, and he said, "You bit me." And I said, "I did not." I was just lying. And the thing is we sat there and stared at each other, and I knew that he knew that I was lying. And he knew that I knew that he knew that I was lying. And I was just mortified, and my pride wouldn't let me let it go, so I sort of walked off in a huff. And a couple months later, and we didn't see each other, and a couple months later he came and knocked on the door and said, "Hey, you want to go out and play?" And I said, "Yes." And we just went on as though nothing had ever happened for a month or two. And then finally, I finally went to him and I said, "Hey, Mark, you know that I bit you. I know that I bit you. I'm really sorry. Why, for the last couple months since we've been friends again, why didn't you say anything?" And what he said to me was, he said, "I realize that friendship is more important than being right." And, it struck me. I can't imagine how this 9-year-old boy had the wisdom to realize that. But I would say ever since then, because it moved me so deeply for him to say friendship is more important than being right, I've been on like a lifelong journey to try to figure out friendship. And I would say that the first point about friendship is we all need friends. We all want friends, and we all need friends. I've been studying Proverbs, and there's a proverb that says, "A man of many companions may come to ruin, but there is a friend that sticks closer than a brother." Now, this was at a time, this was the culture, the Hebrew culture at this time, family was everything. It was a family-oriented society, and yet this proverb says there's a friend that's even better than family. There's a friend that sticks closer. The word sticks closer is the same word in Hebrew that says cleaves to, where a husband and wife will cleave to each other. Here it says a friend will cleave closer than a brother. And there's another proverb in Proverbs 17. It says, a friend loves at all times, but a brother is born for adversity. And I think what this means is, we have family. We have brothers who will help us in a crisis. If we have some kind of urgent issue, our wife is in the hospital or we're in financial straits, we have brothers, we have family that will help us. But they don't always like us. We may not go out for a beer with them. A brother is someone who, in a certain sense, has no choice to be in a relationship with us, but a friend is someone who has chosen us. A friend is someone who said, I choose to be in a relationship with you. I choose to be close friends with you. Our culture, different cultures highlight different kind of relationships. So a romantic culture, an individualistic culture like ours, puts romance first. That's why you see all those glossy magazines. And they're not saying who's best friends with who. They're saying who's sleeping with who, because romance is the most important. In traditional cultures, family is the most important. And in socialist cultures, it's the civic relationship. You're a citizen. That's most important. Every culture, individualistic, traditional, socialist, every culture puts friendship on the back seat. But the book of Proverbs says that we will not survive without friends. We won't survive. In the Garden of Eden, Adam was lonely. And Adam wasn't lonely because there was something wrong with him. Adam was lonely because he was perfect. Because we're made in the image of God. God makes us for friendship. It's one of the most fundamental, important relationships in our lives, and yet no culture that we ever live in makes it a priority. Thomas Aquinas said, there's nothing on this earth more to be prized than true friendship. I've collected a bunch of these friendship quotes because they're so powerful. These are people throughout the ages who are saying great things about the importance of friendship. But the thing is so I want to talk a little bit about developing friendships. And the first point I just want to make is that friendships are something primarily that we discover. Friendships are discovered. Ralph Waldo Emerson, who wrote some really good poetry and a few essays on friendship, he said, friendship does not ask, do you love me, as much as, do you see the same truth? And Lewis went on to say, and this is very harsh, it seems very harsh coming from C.S. Lewis, but he said, that is why those pathetic people who simply want friends can never make any. The prerequisite for having any friends is that you want something else beside friends. Now, I don't think C.S. Lewis was a harsh man, but I think he starts by saying those pathetic people, because I think he's trying to shock us, to say we want friends, but if you want to make friends, you have to understand something. He goes on and says, if someone asks you, do you see the same truth? And your honest answer is, I really don't care about that, I just want you to be my friend, then no friendship can arise, because there's nothing for the friendship to be about. He said, those who have nothing can share nothing. Those who are going nowhere can have no fellow travelers. He's saying that a requirement for friendship is that we're going somewhere, that we have a purpose. I think that's one of the reasons calling is so important, is we need to be going somewhere so that we can have fellow travelers. We have to have something or we can share nothing. And I think we have a choice for our lives. We can look for purposeless acquaintances, or we can live a life of purpose and look for fellow travelers.
Sam, boy, you hear guys, I hear guys say all the time, though, I just hate to get together with a couple guys or with another guy and we just
trying to find my own calling. And Gary invited me to come along and do some retreats with him. And so Gary and I would show up and see Gary every 3 months, and I'd show up at a retreat. I was a facilitator, and then I started speaking with him. And we really didn't have a friendship, but after the retreats, we would talk to each other, and we'd talk about the talks that were given, and we talk about the illustrations, we talk about the setup, and we talk about the schedule. We were looking at something together. And as that happened, something happened in our relationship. And Gary would start to talk, and I could say, now, Gary, your voice doesn't sound like it always sounds. And he says, well, you know, I'm going through something. Or he'd say the same thing to me. He'd say, Sam, you're awfully quiet in this phone call. Are you doing okay? It started by us just working on something together, you know, working on the retreats and the schedule and the talks and the illustrations. But over time, as we were shoulder to shoulder, Gary and I developed into close friends. And I think C.S. Lewis is really right, is that the way we develop friendships is we have something that we care about, something that we look at together. So friendships, I mean, the first point about friendships is I really believe that friendships have to be discovered first. But after they're discovered, I think they have to be forged. To have a deep relationship, it's more than just discovering something, it's forged something. So friendships are forged. I think they're forged through three things. There's constancy, connectedness, and transparency. Under constancy, there's a proverb that says, a friend loves at all times, but a brother is born for adversity. And we already talked about a brother's born for adversity. They're there for a crisis. But a friend loves at all times. And what all times means doesn't mean at your house 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, but it means a friend is a friend at all kinds of times. They're a friend at the good times and the bad times, the ordinary times, at the routine times. I mean, in a certain sense, a friend is not only someone you don't have to clean the house up for, a friend is someone you don't want to clean the house up for, because a friend is someone you're letting in an everyday routine. A friend loves at all times. Another proverb is, a man of many companions may come to ruin, but there is a friend that sticks closer than a brother. Companions are fair weather friends, but a true friend will never let us go to ruin. This is why they're constant, they're fast, they're firm. See, most of our acquaintances, most of our friends are companions, and they're friends with us because we're useful. Sociologists have this term called the commodification of relationships. And what they're saying is more and more relationships are just becoming relationships as long as someone's useful. You know, they could be the life of the party, or they could be always the answer man. They have wisdom. They make us feel good about ourselves. They're useful, or we're useful to them. They like to be with us because we're good connections for work. So companions are someone that are just a means to an end. They're useful. But when the chips are down, they just normally say, call me if you need something. But a friend is not a means to an end. A friend is an end in himself or herself. A friend is someone who goes to the mat for us to keep us from falling. I'm sorry about this.
Yeah, no, well, hey, listen, since you're getting teary-eyed, you need to explain what's going on in your heart, since we try and look at each other at heart level.
You know, I think that we all long for someone who will really go to the mat for us. I think so many of us have had friends that were fair weather friends, and you know, we poured into them. But when a difficult time came about, when there was a struggle, we lost it. We lost the friendship. We realized they were companions. They were companions. A man of many companions will come to ruin. And I think that we've all had that experience in our lives, where someone we thought they were a friend, but they just were a companion. And I think for ourselves, oftentimes, I think we try to be useful to somebody. But the truth is, if we're useful, we're just sort of like a vendor to them. And the moment we're not useful, we're not a friend anymore. And they let us down. They say, call me, you know, call me if you need anything. Whereas a friend says, I'm going to be over right now. Tim Keller yeah.
So Sam, Lindsay, who teaches ethics at the Air Force Academy, chatted on here, and she said that Aristotle speaks of friendship in, and I can't even pronounce it. I'm sure she's laughing at me right now. But it says that Aristotle says there are three types of friendship: utility, pleasure, and virtue. And it seems to go along with what you're saying. You know, the utilitarian, what you can do for me, I'm sure is just the pleasure side of how I can find pleasure from you. And then there's the virtuous side. So, interesting.
Aristotle is someone I have read on friendship. Aristotle has got a brilliant essay. There's also someone, Cicero wrote a brilliant essay on friendship, which I didn't pull any quotes in from. But Tim Keller says, a friend always lets you in and never lets you down. And I think that's something that we long for. We want someone who's always going to let us into their lives and never let us down. So friends are the ones who love at all times, constantly, even to their hurt. So the first thing is consistency, constancy. The second element about friendship is what I call connectedness. We're deeply connected. So Proverbs 25:20 says, like one who takes away a garment on a cold day, or like vinegar on a wound, is one who sings songs to a heavy heart. And the word sing songs there, the songs is the Hebrew word for joyful songs, sings songs of joy to a heavy heart. Or like a madman shooting firebrands or deadly arrows is the man who deceives his neighbor and says, I was only joking. And why can someone sing joyful songs to a heavy heart? Or why can someone deceive and then just say, I was only joking? It's because these companions, these people are emotionally disconnected from us. They don't know our inner topography. They don't know how our heart works. They don't know our heavy heart, or that this joke hurts. But a true friend is someone who gives the gift of connectedness. When I was 16 or 17 years old, I smashed my mom's car. And in the state that we lived in, it was no fault insurance. And so even though the person who hit me had gone through a stop sign, I had to pay for my mom's car. And I'm talking about 1972 or 1973, and the car was about $1,000. And I had $400, and that's all I had. And my parents didn't have any money. And I had $400 in the bank, 400 out of 1,000, and I was saving for college. And I got a check in the mail, a cashier's check, so no name, and there was a card in it. It was a check for $600, and it was just from my friend saying, "You're our friend." And that's all. And it was people who said they saw the pain that I had of, damaging my mom's car so she couldn't get to work. And they just paid out of their, I found out later when I was 30 or 40 who the friends were. One of them was this friend Mark from years ago. They were kids my age. They were 16-year-olds who didn't have any money. But the little money that they had, they pooled together to write a check. These are friends who are connected. They choose to have an inner connection. Emotional disconnection is when I can say, I can be happy even if you're sad. But in friendships, we give the gift of an emotional connection. We give the gift voluntarily. And this is very different than codependency. Codependency is a type of slavery where we're giving out of a weakness. But real friends give the gift of connectedness. It comes out of strength. True friends can't sing songs when we're heavy-hearted. They just can't go on as normal. It's amazing. I mean, if you think about friendship is a gift of emotional connection. A true friend is committed to our emotional flourishing. They can't flourish if we're not flourishing. We can't flourish if they're not flourishing. David Geyer, we all know David Geyer, he's part of Base Camp, and he was once really dejected. He was walking down the street, and a stranger pulled up to him, looked at him and said, "Man, what's wrong with you?" And then he said, "Let's go kick that guy's ass." To David, it meant something. It meant, here's a guy who's willing to voluntarily share in my dejectedness and to do something about it. A friend makes that connection as a gift. And as a result, they're unbelievably emotionally sensitive to us.
So
a friend
Sam,
knows how we feel. Yeah.
Sam, let me ask you a question. Actually, this is Lisa's question, and I realize you're not done yet, but this is good. She said, can our expectations in friendship lead to disappointment in the friendships, since they will never be a perfect friend? What you're describing, and first of all, your stories amaze me, because I can see how God has been building this understanding, this desire, this illustration of friendship with these different friends you've had. But what do you do with that idea of expectations of others in friendship?
So you just froze on me a little bit. I'm going to answer part of what I heard, but I am going to answer some of it later on. I do think that we can have an ideal that makes it hard to find friends. I also think that we have to just experiment. I mean, I think that we have to be a little gracious to our friends when they make mistakes, and we hope they're a little gracious to us when we make mistakes. You know, I've made mistakes with you, Gary, and of course you've never made a mistake with me, but there is a way that I think we sometimes just have to experiment. And I'm going to get on and talk about that a little bit. But I do think that we have a choice in friendships, in the connectedness, and that is we can be the Marlboro man and flourish while our companions flounder, or we can hook our wagons to another, tie our flourishing hearts to theirs. But this connectedness contradicts, it almost directly contradicts the next point. So we have constancy, we have connectedness, and we have transparency or candor. Proverbs 27 says, "Better is an open rebuke than hidden love. Wounds from a friend can be trusted, but an enemy multiplies kisses." And I just love it because it sets these vivid and paradoxical metaphors right next to each other. They're saying there are such a thing as friendly wounds, and there's such a thing as wounding kisses. See, friendly wounds are words that are painful to hear, but we have to hear it. You know, what if, Gary, there's something I need to hear and you don't say it to me? You don't say it. Well, we're not a friend. You know, we have to say something. But hidden love is basically where we say, I love myself too much to tell them that because I don't want to suffer the pain. Friendly wounds are words that are painful to hear, but we have to hear them. Hidden love is where we hide things.
Sam,
it's like an enemy multiplying kisses. Yeah, go ahead.
I wanted to share just a real quick story along those lines because it's one of two times in my life when a faithful friend came to me with loving rebuke. And it was many years ago, but I was in a dating relationship. I had broken it off, but I was still going to take this girl on a date with my friend and his wife. I treated her like trash the entire day, and the next day he called me in and said, listen, you need to know how you treated her, and it was wrong. And it was so good for me to hear that from somebody who loved me because I knew without question that he did. I was then free to go tell that girl, yeah, I blew it. I really treated you like trash, and I want to ask your forgiveness. That was the first time in my life I ever had a breakup with a girl that ended up being a good friend. And I haven't seen her in years, but it was just such a healthy thing all the way around, the way my friend took me into rebuke and corrected me.
You know, and that's the whole thing is we really, like as you said, you ended up having a good friendship. Lisa was asking about, you know, the ideal friendship. I think the ideal friendship often is how we actually handle our mistakes, you know, because we're not going to do everything perfectly. But the question is how we handle our mistakes. I actually have an example of this where, see, in this situation, I think that someone who is both connected to us and transparent to us means it actually hurts them to tell us the truth. So, in fact, it was a year ago this month, I have a friend who has been a friend for a really long time. He runs a ministry, and I felt like he really needed to hear something, or his ministry was going to suffer, and a lot of the guys he was caring for was going to suffer. But the truth is, I did not do a good job delivering it. I delivered it emotionally disconnected. I sort of said, you know, this is your problem. This is what you need to do. And I tried to be nuanced about it, but I was not connected. And as a result, he could not hear what I had to say because he could tell that it wasn't hurting me, if you will, as I told him. But I think a real friend is connected enough that it hurts just to tell them that. Now, I have another situation where I learned something, I think, from that. And I'm still trying to work on that relationship. I'm still trying to patch it up. And it's taken some time. I've apologized and I've talked with him, but I think he feels a little gun-shy around me. And this last summer, I had to talk with another friend of mine who also runs a ministry, and I had to tell him something that I thought was very serious, and it was going to be hard for him to hear. But this time, I felt his pain. And when I talk with him on the phone, I'm crying as I'm talking to him about something I think he needed to hear, but I didn't want him to suffer because of it. I just wanted him to hear it. And I'm telling you, when I talked to this man, he and I talked for hours on the phone afterward. because I think he could sense that I wasn't just being a disconnected answer man, but I was being a connected friend who ached for him more than just wanted to give him advice. But you notice how hard that is. It's a careful kind of transparency. It's a careful kind of candor. It's not just being the answer man. Candor is telling the truth, but connectedness is such a close association that the painful truth I'm telling you is going to equally cause pain for me. We can be candid and not careful, or we can be careful and just shut up. But a true friend, I think, is someone who is carefully candid and candidly careful. It's the deepest and best counsel we can offer. It's a constancy, a connectedness, and a transparent candor. As Proverbs says, as iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. I think that when we do our talking with friends with a connected, constant transparency, they can receive it from us. It's to the best degree that we can. So my 3 points, first we have to discover friends, but then we have to forge friends. And we forge friends through constancy, we forge it through connectedness and transparency. But I think we also need power to create friends. As I was preparing this talk for base camp last week, 2 deep emotions welled up in me. First was I long for this kind of friendship. We need these friends. They're constant. They're always letting us in and never letting us down. They're friends even at their own cost. They're willing to talk to us, but they're broken. When they talk about something painful to us, it hurts them. They can't flourish if we're not flourishing. I want this kind of friend, and I think we all do. So that was the first thing, was a deep longing. But I think the second thing, and equally powerful, was I found this portrayal crushing. Because I think one of the reasons I don't have these kind of great friends is I'm not as good a friend as I can be, because it's hard. A friend always lets you in but never lets us down. Well, I sometimes let people in, and I often let people down. A friend, I have to be going somewhere so I can have a fellow traveler, or sometimes I don't feel like I'm going anywhere. Sometimes I feel like I'm going backwards, maybe. A constant friend, even at my own cost. I want this, but I don't know that I always do that. So in some ways, I felt a longing for this, but in some ways, I felt crushed, like this is too much. I need this. But where do we get the power to become this kind of friend so that we can have the friends that we desperately need? I think we really, like my friend Mark, when I bit him, he became a friend to me so that I could become a friend to him. And later on, I was a friend when he had some difficulties in his life. But we need someone who can be we need the power before we can do it. Where do we get the power to become this kind of friend? I think the answer is in Scripture. The answer is the night before Jesus died, when he was in the upper room and he was having dinner with his disciples. I think he was earnestly, if I can use the word, I think he was desperately trying to get across to his disciples what his whole life was about, what he was trying to do. I think he was desperately trying to show them what he's doing. And the longest narrative in Scripture, longest narrative in any ancient literature about a single evening, is John 13 through John 17, where Jesus, washes the disciples' feet and he says, I am the vine, you are the branches. But right in the heart of that John 13 through 17, in the middle of John 15, Jesus says, tonight I no longer call you servants. A servant does not know his master's business, but tonight I call you friends. Now love one another as I have loved you. I am laying down my life for my friends. You did not choose me, but I chose you. See, I believe Jesus, when he said that, suddenly the whole meaning of the history of the world could be understood in terms we've never thought of. The history of the meaning of the world is friendship. The biblical God is a God of friendship, and we're made in his image. We need that friend. And Jesus says, I am the ultimate friend who loves at all times. Jesus says, I am the friend that is born for adversity. Jesus says, I'm the ultimate one who will claim I take them. Someone once said the tears of God are the meaning of history. God is so connected to us that he's decided he can't flourish unless we flourish. You know, in the Garden of Gethsemane, God in essence said, Jesus, you have a choice. You can lose your friends or you can go to hell. And Jesus says, I will go to hell. That's a friend who will stick closer than a brother so we aren't ruined. And I think if we know this, it empowers us, it liberates us to be the kind of friend that other friends need. And therefore we can have them as the friends. You know, if Jesus trusted and loved me so much, I can move out with a fear of rejection, which I will happen. You know, as Lisa was saying, we're imperfect people. Did you have a question, Gary? No. So
actually,
you know,
Sam,
yeah.
Bob has a question. Gary may be muted.
Okay. That's a good thing.
Oh, happy day, right?
No, Bob Kane asked this question. This is a good question. I'm looking forward to seeing how you answer it. Sam, what would feel to you like your feet were being washed by a true friend?
You know, Bob, I think that's one of the hardest things in the world. I mean, honestly, Bob, between you and me, if you had a choice of either you to wash my feet or me to wash her feet, I'll bet you'd say you'd rather wash my feet. I mean, I've thought of all my friends, and I thought, if I had a choice of washing Gary's feet or Gary washing mine or John washing mine or me washing John's, you know, I take a bath on occasion. It's not like my feet are that bad, but I would far rather wash someone else's feet. And I think that a huge part of friendship is letting someone else care for us. It's letting somebody else speak to us those words that are hard and watching them cry. It's weeping with them. I think it's letting them care for us. And what would it feel like? I think it would feel mortifying, honestly. It'd be just mortifying to have someone do this for me. And yet, I think that that's what God calls us to do, is to accept it from our friends. You know, I have a dream for Base Camp and Secret Garden. Earlier, I said that friendship is discovered. Friendship is that essence of saying, you two, it's kindred spirits, it's fellow travelers. But C.S. Lewis, who also gave that harsh comment about those pathetic people, he said, we think we have chosen our own friends, but for a Christian, there is, strictly speaking, no chances. A secret master of ceremonies is always at work. Jesus said to the disciples, you have not chosen me, but I have chosen you. He also says to every group of Christian friends, you have not chosen one another, but I have chosen you for one another. At the Feast of Friendship, it is God who has spread the board, and it is God who has chosen the guests. It is he who sometimes does and always should preside. Let us not reckon without our host. I really believe that in the Secret Garden and at Base Camp, God has chosen us to be friends. You know, we didn't choose each other. God has chosen us for each other. And therefore, I think that we need to learn how to let someone else wash our feet, to be mortified by it, but to be loved by it. I think that we need to learn how to be connected to another man's heart. You know, I think that Gary, John, and I think, have learned how to even make long-distance relationships work, where we are side by side on things, working on retreats, working on brochures, working on marketing. Sometimes we're working on each other's accounting. But as we work on something else, I think that we're learning how to be friends with each other. And we start to hear the catch in their voice, and we wash their feet by saying, Gary, just tell me a little bit more about what's going on. Tell me a little more what's happening to you. I think Base Camp and Secret Garden, I think that we can all flourish if we connect our hearts to each other, and we link our flourishing to each other's flourishing. So,
you know, Sam, as I hear you share this again, I just think, honestly, in so many ways, this is what was so powerful that happened in the Base Camp gathering. Not that it's a magical event or a magical place or anything else, but you know, what the three of us saw, well, everybody saw there, but three of us on this right now, were men that were doing much of what you're speaking, you know, speaking into another man's life to encourage him, or saying something that he felt that he needed to hear for the progress of his calling and destiny, and his walk with God and his marriage or whatever it was. And that's why it was so powerful that this was the last formal talk given on Saturday late morning, where we had the rest of Saturday and then Sunday till noon, a little bit afternoon. And it was just people, men trying to be good friends to another, you know, and it was just such a powerful thing to see that. Yeah.
I agree. I mean, I think one of the things that I've learned about friendship is it's not just about being useful. I think for a long time I tried to be useful, you know, tried to be the answer man or tried to be the one that comes through, and we do want to come through, but I think learning to have a friendship as an end in itself, not me just being useful to them, and not necessarily them being useful to me, but we just being in each other's company, learning to delight in each other's company, and then working on something side by side. I mean, in a gathering, we were face to face at times, and we were just side by side working on stuff, listening to somebody talk, hearing somebody share, and I think we developed friendship. Oh, I'm glad I'm done with the crying bit.
It was actually very good. I mean, yeah. Thank you for being that honest with your own heart in front of us like that. You know, one thing I was saying before, but I might have been muted, was this idea that, you know, we always hear people say, and I can say, I always hear guys say this. You know, I just hate doing the surface conversation with guys, the weather, sports, you know, whatever it is. Because I think in our heart we really want to have that deeper conversation. That's saying that there's a truth that we both believe in, and we want to look at it and talk about it and live in it. And yet, where we typically go is we stay in the surface category, and it's so unsatisfying. And I think it can get us to the point where we become cynical and say, there just aren't any close friends for me. You know, that's not going to be my life.
So I think part of this whole friendship is there is a discovery element, but I think there's a forging element. There's an element that says we have to be deliberate. It's an act of the will. It's a decision. Boy, am I getting an echo. And Gary, you told the story once of when you just invited a bunch of guys out to a movie. Do you remember that? Tell that story of how you intentionally tried to put yourself in a situation to discover friends. Do you remember that?
Okay, I'm unmuting. Okay, you hear me now? Okay, so yeah, I really wanted to form some close friendships with some guys, and I really wanted to test it out to see if this is somewhere they wanted to go, because I was afraid if I just said, you know, this is the kind of group I'd like to be part of, then everybody tries to mimic those standards, and then it's just inauthentic. So what I simply did was invited a couple guys to go see this movie. Now this was probably, I don't know, 20 years ago now, 15, I don't know. And it was a movie playing at the IMAX in Denver, and it was called Shackleton, his exploration or something. And so we went up, and it was a very good documentary movie about this man and what he was doing and what it was like for them, and really even the friendship, the deep friendship that were formed between the men going on this expedition. And then afterwards we went to a restaurant, and I simply asked them, so what struck you about the movie? I wasn't going to give them instructions about how to think about the movie, how to talk about the movie, but just what struck you. And every man started sharing from his heart what he was moved by, what was stirred in his heart that he wanted as far as with his life or with friendships or with his work or risk or anything like that. And it was very clear that we had something in common. We loved to look at life the same way. We desired the same things. And so we built that up over time. So we, you know, after a couple weeks, I said, hey, let's get together again. Let's talk a little bit more. And we did. And I never said anything about let's make this a consistent group. And so I kind of invited the group to meet for a couple months. And then finally said, listen, why don't we just make this, instead of having to re-invite ourselves to a meeting, why don't we just simply plan on meeting every week, and we'll just talk. And any direction we need to go, but in the direction of our heart and our walk with God. And then, but the other side of this, there was a guy who, after a while, every time we talked, it always revolved around him. It was always what was wrong with his life, what was not going right, how people were mistreating him, what he needed. And even when we forced, or we were intentional about coming in on someone else's life, he would jump in and make a comment or preach or lecture for a while, and then it turned back towards him. And we realized that this man did not want what we wanted for our group, for each other, not for ourselves, but for each other. And eventually we just had to let him go and just say, you know, we don't think this is meeting your needs. But it was a lesson of, first of all, take your time and explore friendship, the heart of other people, before you go deeper, and then having to handle the situation to keep the deep friendship there.
You know, the thing that I like about your story, Gary, is the intentional way that you went out to discover friends. You know, you had something you could talk about. You saw a movie, you could talk about how it moved you or how it stirred you, and you created an environment for friendship to be discovered. And I think that I honestly think one of the biggest reasons we don't have many friends is we haven't been taught how to make friends. You know, it's not like there's no one out there who doesn't want a friend. Everyone out there wants friends, but I think we haven't all learned how to make friends. And I think one of the things that you did there is a lesson we can all learn. It's a way of creating an environment where we can discover friendship, where we can discover something that works. And it took some work on your part, inviting guys, finding some movies, pursuing it, but then you started to get some kindred hearts that resonated together. And they saw something and they enjoyed the friendship. I think there's lots of ways we could do that, but that's a terrific way that you just did it. Yeah.
So okay. So now I see John's on mute, but I'm gonna force him to unmute, and I'm gonna ask him a vulnerable question. So John was with us in Kentucky when we did a retreat there, and there was a point where we were walking from the kind of like the I don't know, like the dorm that we were staying in with the speaking hall. And we were driving, because it's on a good amount of property, over to where we were going to eat, to the dining hall. And so I asked John, I said, John, you know, just so good having you here facilitating, and love doing this with you, love your presence, love that we're shoulder to shoulder on this. And John, you know, we would love for you to do more of this, that this is where your heart is and you have the time to do it, and you sense this is part of the glory, the brilliance, the witness of your life. And as I said this to him, I looked at him in silence for a second. I looked over his face, and John, you were what?
Crying.
I love it. Thank you. So keep going. What was going on in your heart? Why?
Well, and I'll try to keep this very short, but the last couple of years, about 2 or 3 years ago, I happened to see a picture of the Allman Brothers Band cover to their album, Live at Fillmore East. And here's a band, they've just finished a concert, they're setting around their equipment, and that's where the picture's taken. And every time I see that picture, I just thought, here I go, Sam.
More power to you, man.
I thought, I want to be part of a team. I feel like the Lone Ranger, and I want to be part of a team that's on mission, that has an objective that we fight together. And for 2 or 3 years, every single time I saw that picture, that it just hit me deeply. And you were saying, we would like to invite you into this team effort, you know. And I was just blown away that I had an opportunity to do this with some guys that I really deeply love. And so it just, yeah, I just I couldn't respond for a few minutes.
Yeah, and I love just the idea of this is kind of a friendship I've always wanted, you know. So, Sam, this has been so good. Quarter till now. Any final thoughts?
You know, I think the only final thought I have is, I think just acknowledging that we desperately want friendships and then trying to discover and forge them is just something we can do. We're going to make some mistakes, Lisa. I actually think it's part of who God wants us to be. I mean, we've made mistakes in our marriages. We can make mistake in friendship, but let's do it. Let's forge these friendships. Let's make intentional decisions to satisfy this longing that I think is in our heart.
Yeah. I think this is right. This is something where Jesus says, well, ask the Father and he'll give it to you. And I think we ask him for this. And I think we offer it, whether it's offered in return in the same way. And I think, you know, as you were saying, as we can live in the friendship that Jesus offers us, then we can turn around and offer that same friendship because we've experienced it and we're living in it. And I think as we offer that to others, then the next thing we know, people are wanting to offer it back. I just think like attracts like in many ways. You know, friendship attracts friendship. But neediness will attract neediness too, and we have to be careful with that, as you said. So Sam, thank you so much. This was such a powerful night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
So everybody, we'll see you next Thursday. Sam is going to do, I believe, a what did you call that? What's it called?
It's a calling reorientation.
That's right. I like both of those words. I just forget them to put them in that order. So great. So thank you, everybody. Good night. See ya.
Good night.